Alright, hello everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest podcast about DC superheroes ranging from the Golden Age to the Silver Age to the Modern Age.
What a tagline.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, I am your co-host Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at everybody's favorite DC superhero, Hourman.
Yes! And because he's everybody's favorite DC superhero, we had a lot of people knocking down our door to get on this episode, but only Adam Pelche made the cut. Thank you for joining us, Adam.
You gave me a coffee, so I had to say it.
Yes, that's all it took. Okay, so yes, Hourman. Before we get into this, Adam, had you ever heard of this character?
Yes, actually, I believe it was the last episode I was on, and we were looking at the history of Dr. Occult, and actually Hourman made a brief appearance in the Silver Age comic there, so
yes.
That was actually my first introduction to, even though I heard of Hourman before, that was the first time I'd ever read anything with him in it.
Okay.
And what an impression he made.
Yes. Oh yeah, that issue of Sandman Mystery Theater, right? I think it was.
I believe so.
I think so,
right.
Yeah.
And Josh, had you ever heard of Hourman?
So I had heard about him, again, like we'd kind of briefly run into him in that comic. And then, actually, when I was reading our selections for this episode, I had realized I had read something with him in it, because I had read that Rock of Ages story before when I was like a really, really, really young kid and completely forgot about it. And as I was reading the comic, I was like, this is so familiar. Why have I read this before? And I realized it like all flashed, the whole arc like went into my mind. And I was like, when does Hourman show up? And then his like brief appearance in that comic, I was like, I didn't even realize that was the same character. Yeah.
Yeah, well, same character. Yeah, we'll get into that later.
Right.
But okay, so just to remind everybody, the premise of the show is DC is known for rebooting and revamping their characters every decade or so. And so we're kind of going through all the big ones, starting in the Golden Age. And so right now we're on Hourman, who is not exactly a household name, right? And we can talk about... We don't really need to explain it because it's all explained in these issues, right? So we'll just start with the first appearance of the first Hourman, which is Rex Tick-Tock Tyler. And his first appearance was in Adventure Comics number 48 from March 1940. And Adam, you are going to tell us what happened in this issue.
I sure am. So, Tick-Tock Tyler, the Hourman. So, in this introduction, as for a lot of Golden Age origin stories, we don't actually get the origin depicted. We just have a brief explanation that this cat, Mr. Tyler, was able to come up with, I'm going to pronounce it Miraclo, which is a type of drug which enables him to have superhuman reflexes, strength, and agility for pretty much, not pretty much, for exactly an hour. Not a second more, not a second less, an hour. And he's actually not able to use the drug an hour after it wears off. So this is actually a pretty interesting conceit. But we don't get into that, because right away we're just thrown to the fact that mysteriously he receives a notice from a housewife whose husband... Gosh darn it, he's got him with some rapscallions, you know, he's performing the crime, and she don't like that, so she's getting Hourman, who apparently she knows the address of, to intervene and help her husband. So we then see the husband is part of this gang in which they're planning this heist. During a costume party, their foolproof plan is to turn off the lights, steal someone's precious necklace, and then run away. And it works, if not for Hourman. And this is pretty interesting, because as Hourman is pursuing the thieves and he's chasing them about the city, there's actually a timestamp at the bottom of the panels accompanying him. So you actually see how much time he has remaining of his super abilities, which I actually appreciate, because I think that adds a little bit of potential tension to the story. I'm not going to say it was executed the best here, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Anyway, the ensuing chase resolves where the thieves enter into their hideout. Of course, Hourman appears there using some gas that he has held within his ring. I was not sure rings work that way, but he knocks them out, escorts the naughty husband up on the roof, telling him that crime does not pay, and telling him he ought to change his ways. Well, sure enough, he does. He ends up going back to his wife, promising to abstain from a life of crime. The precious jewels stolen during the heist are returned. the criminals are arrested, and then our friend here, Rex Tyler, ends up being admonished at work for being too weak, too mild-mannered.
Sure.
Little do they know. And that's how it ends before the comic pursues into its usual Golden Age fashion of a bunch of non-sequitur stories and casual racism, as we come to expect in the 1940s. But yeah, that's the first depiction ever of the Hourman.
So here's the thing. Back in these days, obviously Superman had hit, and so they were like, any variation they could come up with, right? Okay, what's a different... And to be fair, and I don't mean to be harsh, but a lot of these characters were idiotic, and I think this could be one of them. I think this idea is one... If all of the members of the Justice Society, this could be my least favorite Hourman. I think he's the stupidest concept. The fact that he has to take a drug... Let's be clear, it's a drug, right?
This is the message we're sending to kids.
Yeah.
Take drugs because they'll make you strong. People will like you.
Yes.
You'll be a better person. Yeah.
Yeah,
Josh?
I think that that's definitely the weak point of this story. I think that a character that has the powers of Superman, essentially, that is, and it's temporary, is a really interesting idea. You can it kind of solves the problem that a lot of people have with Superman, right? Where it's like, he's indestructible, how do you stop him, blah, blah, blah. So giving him a time limit is pretty interesting, that he's got to really plan out when he's going to activate his powers and plan out these missions to stop these bad guys within an hour. I think that giving him a pill to swallow is very strange. I don't know why it wasn't a magical stone and an amulet or something that's like, and that could be the reason why it's exactly an hour. Like, make it some sort of mystical thing. It's strange that he's developed this pill himself that gives him these powers. Why the pill gives him the powers? Like, it's like weirdly blurring the line of like science and magic. And if it were just magic, I think it would be 100% believable. But because it's science, it feels strange. It has this weird disconnect.
Now, I want to
doesn't work for me.
I want to give a little anecdote about this, because my exposure before the comic to Hourman, I knew the concept, and I was associating him with an hourglass that he had as his insignia, and basically which clasped his cape to his back. So my impression as a young person, not really having read anything with Hourman, was that, he turns the hourglass over and is somehow magical. That gives him power.
That'd actually be cooler.
Yeah, and he can actually look down and see the sand, like in the amulet or something. Yeah, that's super smart.
And because it's already incorporated as part of his costume, I just don't understand why the creators didn't think to do that.
Yeah, it is strange.
Go ahead.
Because I think a lot of the other things in this comic kind of works for me. I like the idea of him like setting up a P.O. box for himself and getting letters to go help people, and then that also gives him like the ability to plan out how he's going to stop whatever he's doing. He's not just like walking down the street and stopping a mugging. He's kind of planning out everything because he only has that hour. So that's great. I mean, it's goofy that he's stopping some mugging in, at a party where they turn off the lights or whatever, but it has the like potential to be something interesting. I think it's just that the setup is wrong. I think the whole like crux of the character of taking a pill is like kind of defeating the purpose of it. So
yeah, let's just quickly mention that the creators here, the writers, Ken Fitch, who I'd never heard of, but he's apparently one of the most prolific writers of the Golden Age. He also co-created Mr. America and Don Drake. And the artist is Bernard Baily, who co-created The Spectre and Tex Thompson. I'm not a huge fan of this art. Even by Golden Age standards, I didn't think it was particularly great. Adam, what do you think of the art?
I wasn't a fan of it either. As I mentioned, I perused through the rest of this comic because it was an anthology. That's how these comics were formatted in the Golden Age, and I found a lot of the other segments in this comic were illustrated a lot more impressively than what we saw here, but it's pretty standard Golden Age superhero fare, and I would even say there are some panels that seem a bit rushed. Some parts even just seem and this might be due to reprints or coloration of the scan, but it seems a little bit muddy or murky.
Right.
I'm used to like bright popping colors from Golden Age comics. That's one of the things I love about the aesthetics of them, and with this lacking it just makes it seem a little bit dull, I guess.
Sure. I can't disagree with that. What about the costume? Josh, are you a fan of this color design with the yellow and black?
You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because it's like a sandy, like hourglass theme. It's so strange that he's like, well, I've got an hour, so I guess I'll make my whole costume an hourglass motif. It's that part is strange. I think the costume itself is fine. I will say the little like red stripes on the bottom of his cape make it looks like he's just wearing a like beach towel tied around his neck. But I think it's fine as far as Golden Age costumes go. I don't know.
You know, I gotta say, it is kind of unusual to have like a black torso and arms. So yeah,
and a mask too.
And a mask. Yeah, it's not a bad design. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so again, I feel like the character's limited. I can see how really creative writers could make this work, but I personally think it's limited. But now we're gonna jump. So we should point out, to clarify, DC did revive. They started reviving the heroes in the 50s, and they rebooted them, the Flash, Green Lantern, Atom, and Hawkman. Then they kind of stopped there, and then they started bringing back Golden Age characters in their original form on Earth too. I don't know why there was the disconnect, but Hourman was one of them. And in this issue that we're about to talk about, which I'm going to summarize, this is not only the first Silver Age appearance of Hourman, it's also the first Silver Age appearance of Dr. Fate, and it's the second Silver Age appearance of Green Lantern. So this is
Green Lantern as a whole, or this version of
this? Sorry, the Golden Age Green Lantern.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so Green Lantern was rebooted as Hal Jordan in '59ish, I think, and then after a year or two, he met the original Alan Scott Green Lantern the same way the Flash met the original Jay Garrick Flash,
Gotcha.
right? Then eventually they brought back the whole Justice League. But anyway, okay, so this is aesthetically my favorite period for comics. I just love this whole time period. And we start off with a cover of the classic Golden Age character Solomon Grundy holding up a kind of Dr. Fate frozen like a statue over his head with green energy around him. This beautiful like tree back here, and the full moon, right? And just this is a classic Silver Age cover. Like, look at the dark blue colors. Sorry, we should mention the issue number. It's showcase number. Is it
55?
55. Okay, I can barely read it. But yeah, just a great cover, a great Silver Age cover.
And is this the first Silver Age depiction of Solomon Grundy as well?
Yes.
Okay, and I just have to say, I love Solomon Grundy, one of my favorite DC villains.
Yes.
/ anti-heroes, however you want to frame him. So that excites me.
I think the public loves Solomon Grundy, but what they don't realize is that he disappeared from comics for like 20 years, and he was always strictly an Earth 2 character. And it wasn't until after Crisis that they kind of brought him into the mainstream. But yeah, anyway, great character. Okay, so this is by Gardner Fox and Murphy Anderson. We'll talk about those creators later, but we open up with a beautifully depicted scene of Solomon Grundy kind of just rising out of Slaughter Swamp. The names here, I love them. And he's kind of remembering how he was captured by Green Lantern and encased in this green energy bubble. And apparently it's an exact recreation of a page from All-Star Comics 33, 1947. So it's been like almost 20 years since this story happened. And basically, he's in this energy bubble that's circling the Earth. He somehow manages to force the bubble to crash back onto the Earth. He makes his way through the swamp, smashes through a wall, and then we kind of cut over to Old Salem. Again, these Silver Age comics, I want to read every single one of them. Like the fact that now we see Kent Nelson and Inza Kramer driving towards Dr. Fate's tower, stone tower, and again it's the tower with no doorway, but they just walk through. Like it's so cool. And then the sexism of Inza just getting his costume ready from here you go honey, but still it's a cool scene. She puts the costume on, or he puts the costume on, and then right away he's flying out, and then he runs into the energy bubble, and he recognizes that it's an energy bubble from Green Lantern. And I have to point out, I kind of just always assumed that Green Lantern had to concentrate to
hold
to
it.
generate something. Yeah, but no, it's been there 20 years.
Well, maybe that's the Hal Jordan version, right?
Sure.
The Earth 2 rules are different. Also, I just want to point out one thing with the synopsis, Mike.
Sure.
When Dr. Fate was observing where this distress was coming from, it was the swamp filled with radiation next to a chemical plant, and his reaction is, what evil could be happening there?
Yeah.
What's evil about a radioactive swamp?
Yeah, like how could that be evil? That's the exact words. Then we cut over. Oh, again, this is just beautiful. Then we cut over to Hourman in his headquarters. So he's the president of the company of Tyler Chemical Company, and we see like a just a regular looking, almost like a closet, but with this big circular steel entrance, and he's stepping through the doorway, and this Hourman costume, his hand is hanging there. Then he reaches over into his, it's almost like a fishbowl full of miracle pills, and he grabs like a handful, and he's like, I'll take a handful of miracle pills with me, but we'll hold off swallowing one until I see what it is that broke into the radioactive marshes. I may need a full hour of super energy to cope with it. It's just, this whole concept is bizarre. So then we cut over, now he's already made his way there. And you know how Superman's the Man of Steel? Our man is the man of the hour. How creative, right? Yeah. So he goes over, and right away they start fist fighting, and you know, Solomon Grundy's punching him in the stomach. And we should also point out Solomon Grundy's much taller than our man. Mm-hmm. Then right away Dr. Fate intervenes, right? And again, we got to comment on this as we're going. The art is so, what's the word here? Like the texture of the trees and the swamp, and Dr. Fate's mask is so well rendered beautifully by Murphy Anderson. The dark purple sky and the dark blue sky, like it's just incredible, this art. I love it. So they're fighting back and forth, and then, you know, Dr. Fate's encasing him in ice, and then he breaks out, and then this is a weird scene that where now what happens is he Dr. Fate gets frozen, but now he's thinking, and then Solomon Grundy picks up and he thinks, well, now if I get into contact with him, I'll fill his body with electrical magic, which doesn't quite make sense, but who cares? It's a 60s comic book, right?
Is he actually frozen?
I was going to say he's pretending to be frozen.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah.
It's a ruse.
Trick him.
So, yeah,
that's okay.
But also, he must have incredible abs to like maintain that sort of like stiffness all the way through his body. Like he is like, you ever have a Stretch Armstrong doll when you're a kid and you leave it out in the sun and it solidifies? It's kind of like that.
Yeah. Miracle Man. So then Our Man is, you know, he's obviously still trying to help out. So then he lunges at Solomon Grundy. He goes to punch him in the stomach, but he's like, what's happened to me? My miracle power is fading away, but the hour isn't up. What's wrong? So then we have to cut to the next part 2. Solomon Grundy goes on a rampage. So then Solomon Grundy's using Dr. Fate to smash Our Man. He defeats them both. They're both like knocked down in the swamp, and then again a great sequence. He's walking through the swamp, and the radiation from him kind of like envelops these objects nearby, like a wheelbarrow, not a wheelbarrow, like a wooden barrel, a broom, a fence, and some other things, and it pulls around him, and he's attracted them, and they're floating him around him as he's walking through the city. It is so cool. And he actually goes into Gotham City. Now we should point out, in the Gotham City of Earth 2, not only does Batman live there, Green Lantern lives there, okay? So he goes in, and right away he goes to, is this a bank? Yeah, yep. He goes to a bank and rips open the vault, and we can see him with all the money, but then somehow Green Lantern's already onto him. He's like, and he sees him, he's like, it hardly seems possible. I left Solomon Grundy trapped on a cold, lifeless planet. Keep in mind, this was 20 years ago. That's how long. And he just right back into it, right? So then he envelops Solomon Grundy in an energy bubble. Grundy breaks out. They're fighting back and forth, right? It's a really cool scene, but then right at that moment, Dr. Fate shows up to help out, right? So then Our Man pops in, and he's like, and as he's running in, he's like, almost 2 hours have passed since I took the miracle pill, and another few seconds, an hour having intervened after my hour of energy charged powers, I can take another. So this is where I learned that he has the powers for an hour,
Right.
then he has an hour break, then he can take another one.
Yeah.
It's insane. But
He's
anyway.
got to eat some like orange slices.
Yeah,
Just chill out for a little bit.
right.
Hydrate yourself, get some
Yeah.
water.
Right.
Oh, did you mention the wood, Mike? The wood is very
Yeah,
important.
I was actually going to ask about this after.
Okay, go ahead.
Why is Green Lantern weak to wood? I didn't.
The Golden Age Green Lantern's weakness is not yellow, it's wood. For some reason, that's his power.
Interesting.
And his ring is magical, it's not scientific. So the Golden Age Green Lantern got his ring from maybe a Chinese sorcerer. I can't remember the exact thing. Something to do with the railroad and something to do with the Chinese something.
I think because he represented metal and wood was another element. I vaguely recall this.
Could be.
Interesting.
But the thing is, as you mentioned, Solomon Grundy has all these pieces of wood debris flying around him, and he's kind of telekinetically, I guess,
Yes.
jettisoning them towards Green
Right.
Lantern, and that's what's causing him to start losing the fight against Grundy.
Right. It's awesome. Yeah, it is. So then, now Green Lantern has been basically defeated. So now Dr. Fate and Hourman have to team up. Oh, and by the way, we should point out, on the cover, they are called, there's a nickname for them. Oh, or is it inside? It's the Team Supreme, is it? Or is it, they give them a name, do you remember that?
Oh no, I don't.
The Super Team Supreme. Okay, that didn't last.
It sounds like a value combo.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. So then we can see, now it's part 3. Oh, it's still Solomon Grundy goes on a rampage, but it's chapter 3. Now he's using, Dr. Fate's using his powers to generate this like energy field that looks like, what is it?
Aurora Borealis.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like that. And then, but see, okay, no, this is the part, I don't want to have to read it, but I don't remember, does he get mind controlled here, or what happens?
So, something weird is going on with Dr. Fate's magic and with Hourman's powers, and it kind of comes to a head here when the two of them are near each other and they decide to start attacking each other. Like, it's almost as if their minds are like compelling them to attack each other instead of Solomon Grundy. And we find out after they kind of defeat each other and they come to that their powers for some reason are interacting with Solomon Grundy's radiation, and they're like distorting them. So his magic isn't working and his powers aren't working, and they hate each other. Not really sure why.
Right.
Maybe it's like the science and magic. I'm not sure. They don't really explain it. They're just like,
It's
Solomon
radioactivity.
Yeah.
You don't need to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what's funny is a little side note. I just read this little quote from like a writer in the 80s, basically mocking Stan Lee, saying Stan Lee thought that radiation could do anything. He didn't know what radiation did, so he just used it for everything. No. All writers were like that in the 50s and 60s. They just used radiation. That was just a Deus Ex Machina, an explanation for everything.
Right.
What's wrong with that, right? Godzilla, whatever. It's fun. It's all in good fun. So then anyway, speaking of 60s comics, now we have the coincidence of not only does Green Lantern show up 30 seconds after Solomon Grundy breaks into that jail, now Solomon Grundy's old gang just happens to be driving down the street at this exact moment, right? Hey, look, it's our old pal, Solomon Grundy. Where you been all these years, right? So then they get back together.
Are they from Jersey?
Yeah.
What's the matter with you?
Yeah. So then, what's his name? Solomon Grundy explains how he was in the energy bubble, how he managed to manipulate it to come back to Earth. So then he takes Green Lantern and they go to, is it their headquarters? Where do they go here?
They go back to this. Well, we don't really know where they're going.
Okay.
In the story, but they're going back to the swamp.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I love this, how Dr. Fate and Hourman come to, and then Dr. Fate explains that now they're going to go chase after Solomon Grundy, and he's going to fly. Dr. Fate's going to fly and create a non-gravitic pathway in the air so that Hourman can ride along, drawn by the speed of Dr. Fate flying. And we see Hourman standing in his wake, basically. It's ridiculous, right?
Would you believe that's scientifically possible?
I do, because radiation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So then they now the bad guys are robbing another bank, or it's not a bank, it's Regal Jewelers, and so Hourman comes in and thud, zock, blam, clock. You know, they're beating up all the bad guys.
Right. Well, Hourman does a little pit stop without Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate continues on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Without him.
Yeah. Why does Dr. Fate leave?
He's like, oh, somebody's robbing a bank. I'll do a little crime fighting
because
myself.
He goes ahead, right?
Yeah.
And actually, this kind of makes strategic sense, too, because they want to keep their distance from one another because they realize their powers interfere with one another. So actually, I don't mind that plot point because it does give us this nice, juicy tidbit, as Mike is about to get into.
Well, I was going to say quickly, I actually thought this was Solomon Grundy's gang. It's another random gang.
Right.
Yeah, that's even funnier. Okay, I forgot about that. So then now we join Dr. Fate. Flying along. If you want to jump in, Adam, go ahead. If there's something you want to talk about this scene, Solomon Grundy is in the swamp. This scene confused me because now it's not Green Lantern. It's an image of Green Lantern that Dr. Fate creates, right?
That's right. Like, he creates a manifestation that is also strong that starts beating up Solomon Grundy. So it's just not like a hologram. Right. It's like an outright, like, manifested Green Lantern. But what comes up from the swamp after Dr. Fate uses his magic to drain the waters? It's a weird zombified Solomon Grundy-esque Green Lantern with his shirt and pants torn.
Right.
He looks like something from Return of the Living Dead. I love this stuff.
Yeah, it's great. He's like like a Solomon Grundy-sized Green Lantern, like he's giant. And he's like, I kill, you know, because that's how Solomon Grundy talks. And so they're fighting each other, and Solomon Grundy is using Green Lantern's ring to like create objects like a mace, and Dr. Fate's fighting back with his magic. He's shooting. What is this? What is he shooting here? Oh, tiny suns. I love this stuff. This is great. So now Solomon Grundy / Green Lantern is being bombarded with these tiny suns. And then suddenly a startling change comes over the Emerald Crusader. So this was, I don't get it. So was this Green Lantern or was this Solomon Grundy?
This was Green Lantern.
Okay, he was just Grundified.
Yeah, gotcha. Grundy buried him in the swamp to turn him into like another Grundy.
Okay. So then...
and somehow the suns...
Did it?
Burned off the radiation with...
Yes, suns get rid of radiation, obviously.
That's how radiation works.
Well, you know, these are magic
radiation
suns.
Versus radiation.
Right.
Yeah, of course. But magic suns, like, you know, you can leave that to imagination, right?
I can buy that. Why not at this point?
So then Dr. Fate uses his magic to knock Solomon Grundy over, and then Solomon Grundy is just tipping back into the swamp, and then and then Hourman punches him, and then Dr. Fate zaps him with like electricity. Yeah. And then Hourman punches him again. This is again some great art. And they're kind of just tag teaming him here, and then they decide, oh, I know why your Green Lantern bubble didn't work. It's because it was just science. If we combine magic and science, right, that will put it together. Even though I thought Green Lantern was magic.
Is magic. So I think this is a discontinuity from the writers making associations with Hal Jordan's character, because his ring is like alien technology, whereas this is mystically imbued. So, you know, again, this is why they had to retcon everything.
So then they encase him in a round bubble that's like yellow and green of energy, right? And they put him inside of it, and then they shoot him. They shoot him upward and outward into an orbit around the planet. Goes the macabre man-thing, endlessly circling the world that spawned him. And then the last panel, Dr. Fate says, "My crystal ball and your power ring will glow you in a unique way if Solomon Grundy ever escapes from that prison." I don't know how they know that. Personally, I don't think he'll ever bother us again. And then Green Lantern, I wonder. And then the end. That's it. So... there you go. Josh, what did you think of Showcase 55?
So, I didn't love it.
Okay.
I like the charm of the kind of like campy goofiness of this age. I don't mind when things are a little strange and weird, and I just feel like it was maybe too much and not enough cohesion for me. Okay. I still had fun reading it, and I enjoyed this comic. I just don't think the story was good. A lot of the stuff felt very just like convoluted to have some like things happening, like Hourman and Dr. Fate's powers nullifying with the radiation, but also turning them against each other for some reason. It's so strange. Maybe if they just set up the fact that every time these three heroes go around Solomon Grundy, they all turn on each other. So they have to figure out a way to like get past that or something.
Sure.
Yeah, why Hourman is even here is so strange in the middle of like the marshes.
I mean, doesn't it show you, like it shows me of these three, he's to me useless, I think.
Yeah, he's just kind of here for the ride.
Yeah. That was my first thought after finishing this comic, that after the conclusion, if he wasn't even in there, they probably would have dealt with Solomon Grundy much quicker.
Yes.
Because, again, for the final conclusion, he maybe punches him in the butt when he goes flying by him, and then nothing else happens. In fact, the final panels proceeding to the end is just, it's both Green Lantern and Dr. Fate encapsulating him in this mystic ball, shooting him back up into space, and Hourman was just sitting back doing his drugs, not really doing too much.
Right.
But he did stop that jewelry heist, though.
That's true. He did
Which
do
had
that.
nothing to do with the main plot.
He is really into protecting jewels, as we've established in his origin story.
Right. There's probably some pearls in there. I'm gonna make a stop.
I gotta make a pit stop, guys. You go ahead.
So, okay, I'm Gardner Fox. I'm always a fan of his stuff. Yes, it's absurd. It's Silver Age DC. But it's enjoyable for me. Like, when I read this, I'm enjoying it. And it makes me want to read more. Maybe I couldn't sit down and read 10 in a row, but I could definitely sit and enjoy these. But let's talk about the art by Murphy Anderson. I love this art. He's obviously not as skilled an artist as someone like, say, Kurt Swan or Gil Kane. But his line work, I think, is incredible. Adam, what do you think?
I like the artwork quite a bit. I do wish there was a little bit more variety in the expressions of Solomon Grundy. That was one issue I had with the art, but otherwise, I think it was beyond serviceable. I think, as you said, there was some great dynamic poses going on. Aside from the oddly stiff Dr. Fate in Solomon Grundy's hands, which I thought was a bit awkward. The rest of it I thought had this really great flowing dynamicism going on. But even more so than the line work, you've touched upon it so much, Mike. The colors for me. When I think about the Golden Age comics I mentioned, I like bright, popping colors. For this age, I like these sort of weird, saturated, almost like autumnal colors, and I think this one does it to a T. Regardless of what the story is in terms of its merit, just in terms of an aesthetic property or artifact, I love just looking at it.
I agree. And unfortunately, the colorist is not... Oh, wait a minute. Are they credited? No, I can't find any credits for a colorist.
Interesting.
Yeah. Unfortunately, back in those days, you were lucky to even get the writer and the artist, right? So, but clearly they knew what they were doing. And we've kind of debated on this show before about the merits of like digital scans. And I think when we first started, for example, when we were talking about, say, McFarlane's Spider-Man, I always thought, oh, no, they're not altering the art. Well, first of all, yes, they are, and it's partly because they have to, because unless they have the original pages, they're scanning a comic book, then they're making it black and white, then they're making it color, and you're going to lose detail, right? But I tell you, these scans of the original, like this is just a fan, I think, scanning this, the line work is... Even though it was on primitive pulp paper, look at the line work, how fine it is. Like the bricks in the tower, and like we talked about like the shadow on the bricks, the tree branches. You know, like look at all this line work on the ground here on original page 5, and like we talked about the colors, the red of the ground, the blue of the sky. I
think too, when you start to digitize things, you start to lose a little bit of the charm, because if all three of us had the same exact comic, it's still going to be slightly different each one of them, because of the printing, the paper has the defects in it, the textures, like it's all going to have like a character to it. And when it's digital, it's like very clean, almost like sterile, so it does definitely change the art. And
it's funny because, you know, there's this ongoing kind of debate with Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan and maybe even Martin Scorsese about shooting things on film and projecting in film. Which, when you get to projecting, I kind of laugh at them. But when I look at a comic book, I can see where they're coming from, because I feel like in the 90s when comics changed from newsprint to shiny paper, I don't even feel like they're real comics anymore. I have an attachment to newsprint comics. I have no attachment to shiny paper comics. What do you think about that, Adam?
They definitely have their own tactile differences, and I do think there's a different sort of mood. Maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe this is clouding my own view, but I do agree with you. There's something about the newsstand comics I used to buy at the late 80s, early 90s as a youngin' that really strike a chord with me. And the glossy paper ones, the shiny paper, I do think... Even when you just look at the technology for getting the color on the page, like it does actually change the saturation. It changes a very technical aspect of the art. So I do agree with you. I think there is more than just like a quaint charm. There is something very visibly different about these old comics. Now, with that said, when we talk about the next iteration of Hourman, we're definitely going to notice that considering the era that's coming from. But one thing I just want to touch upon, since you're talking about the art in this one, something that usually bothers me a lot is the absence of backgrounds, especially in contemporary comics. Usually we just see a gradient background or we see just like solid color panels. This one, for the most part, has great use of backgrounds, and when they do use solid colors, it really blends into a feeling of atmosphere or a feeling of the environment, rather than just an artist couldn't bother rendering a background, so they had to fill in with a gradient hue or with a color. This is one thing that I think makes this era particularly excel, even if I might have some misgivings of the plot, because I agree with Josh. I think as a story, it's not that great. I think as an artifact, though, of its time, and as just 20 or so pages of beautiful, colorful art, it's more than charming. I think, like I said, this is my aesthetic. I love that.
Even those like flaws in the story has like a charm to it, right? Like it's it kind of in the same way that like Adam West Batman is like goofy, and it's like if you think about it, if you look at it through the lens of like a real story that's happening, you're like, this is awful. But if you're able to kind of let go of that and just watch it for what it is, it's enjoyable, right? And that's definitely kind of what I felt reading this. It's like half the stuff that's happening is like not just ridiculous for a superhero to do, but it's just like a ridiculous idea to even come up with, and like, why is any of this happening?
You know what? I'll get into this more in a future episode, but there was a book written in the 80s that was turned into a series of articles, and I believe it was Comics Feature, okay? And it was written by Will Jacobs and Gerard Jones. Now, there's a whole bunch of controversy with Gerard Jones, which we won't get into, but the actual text that they wrote was... It opened my eyes to the Silver Age, okay? Because through reading their articles and seeing the little panels they gave from stories like this, again, as a 13-year-old, I was going down that fanboy route of the more realism, the better, right? And then you start to realize, no, they were onto something with these Silver Age stories. And one of the examples someone gave, it might have been Jim Shooter or John Byrne or both of them, they were talking about, oh, well, in a Silver Age story, you know, Superman would be flying along, and then a random sea monster would show up, and then he'd defeat the sea monster and then go on to the next thing. Whereas now, in the modern day 80s, we would explain that with 6 issues of backstory. And he's thinking that's a good thing, and I'm thinking, no, you've got it wrong. This is kind of, there's something, it's almost dreamlike. Like they're going along, we're going to Slaughter Swamp, but oh, there's a bank robber, you go ahead. And it's almost like insane, like David Lynch craziness, right? But it works, right?
I think that's why I appreciate it so much. When you talk about that dreamlike landscape, like even with the autumnal colors of this, it fits. And I do want to argue that this makes more cohesive sense in a way than even the origin issue, because at least we have motivation for Solomon Grundy. We kind of have an explanation for why these two heroes would be intervening. We have Dr. Fate sensing a disruption from this somewhat mystical character. We have Hourman, who actually has a chemical facility that's adjacent from the swamp. And it kind of makes sense why both of them would pursue. And then this entanglement with Green Lantern, while I do think it would make more sense for this just to be a Green Lantern Dr. Fate crossover, at the very least, it makes more sense than just a rapid succession of receives letter, someone stealing jewels, gotta return the jewels.
right.
Gotta run those jewels, you know. So I'm just gonna say, I love this one. Spoilers, this is my favorite comic of the trio.
Right.
I can totally understand why. I think the key is, and there's a quote, I'm trying to find it, hopefully I will, but basically my feeling is always when I read these comics is that this comic knows exactly what it is, and it knows what its audience is, and like the art fits with the writing, fits with the costumes, fits with the colors. But when you go, the further you go along to like the 80s and the 90s, it starts to get where you have writers trying to be realistic and trying to be violent, but you have characters dressed up in leotards,
right?
And so it doesn't match, right? And so it's kind of like you have to either, don't get me wrong, you can make superhero comics better, but there's a certain wall of realism you can't break through but yet keep the leotards.
It's a balance for sure, because there's fantastic Batman stories where it's gritty and dark, and it's like a very good story. The art matches it. He's got like updated costumes or whatever, and it fits the whole tone of everything. But it's about that balance. Like the art, the story, and the dialogue, and the characters themselves, the costume designs, they all fit in this comic 100%.
Yeah,
it's cohesive. And just going off of one quick thing that Mike said, I do feel like the creators knew what they were doing here. They were not ashamed of what they were doing.
Right.
They reveled in it. I felt like the Golden Age comic we looked at, there was a bit of condescension happening.
True.
Kids are stupid. They'll like anything we throw at them, and that was kind of the feeling I got from it from the creators. Here, I got the feeling that people really loved this, and they were not putting on any pretenses about it as they were making their work. Now, as we get into the next issue we're going to talk about, I'll give my opinions then, but I do think we've also seen a tide change where, as Mike said, people are trying to maybe take a little bit too much stock in investment in being serious and dark.
Okay, so
interesting.
Josh,
okay,
yeah, you're gonna.
So the next one we're going to be talking about is JLA number 12. Now this is the reboot from the late 90s, right?
97-ish, yep.
And a lot has been going on at this point. There's a new Justice League of America. They go by JLA now. Wonder Woman is dead. Superman, I think, drank some Crystal Pepsi, and he's called like Blue Superman. Superman Blue,
Electric Blue Superman.
Right.
I like Blooperman myself.
Blooperman. If you don't mind,
great.
I'm just gonna run down quickly.
Yeah.
The Flash is not Barry Allen. It's Wally West, his nephew.
Yeah.
Green Lantern is not Hal Jordan. It's
Kyle
Rayner.
Yeah.
Green Arrow is not Oliver Queen.
It's his like
son Connor Hawke.
Yeah.
So basically, every single member except Batman is either a different person or altered in some radical way.
Aquaman, as we see, is the infamous one-handed, tried-in prosthetic Aquaman, and I think Batman might be the only character that retains his costume and general identity for the most part.
Only one. Yeah. Anyway.
So the issue that we're going to be talking about is in the middle of a 6-issue arc.
Right.
So it's a little confusing, and I didn't realize I had read this until like I was about halfway through, and it dawned on me that I read this as a kid, and actually I loved this story as a kid, and it actually stuck with me. So the whole idea behind this arc, which is titled Rock of Ages, the
Def Leppard story,
right?
Thank you for that reference.
So there is a.
You know what? It doesn't even matter what Rock of Ages is about. Or do you want to just explain this issue? Or do you want to explain
explain it to me, because
because
I read a lot of Grant Morrison, and even I'm lost on this.
So there's a group of supervillains that have come together called the Injustice Society, or maybe they're just called the Injustice.
I think it's Injustice League.
The Justice League, and they have this plan. They're led by Lex Luthor. They've got the Joker. They've got I don't know, a bunch of other supervillains. And Lex has this stone called the Philosopher's Stone. It also has another name that's, I think, more common.
Is it the Sorcerer's Stone?
No, we're not in the U.S. We are Canadian.
Sure.
No, there's another like DC term for this artifact.
Oh, gotcha.
That's like, I think, more commonly used, but it's just like some magical word, I think.
Let me see if I can hold on.
Ooh.
Phil, our listeners appreciate this part,
I feel like maybe listeners would recognize it by the other name more.
Is it the Tesseract?
No, it's
No.
something similar, but it essentially can like open up portals through time and space.
Okay.
And Lex is going to use this to destroy the world or whatever. So the Justice League or JLA start this plan to stop him. While this is happening, this like weird god character. I want to say Metroplex, but that is the
Metron.
That's the big city that
That's the giant
transforms from Transformers. Yeah,
No.
If he was in here, that'd be amazing.
that would be pretty awesome.
And I just want to point out, Metron, the new god, rides around in a chair and knows everything.
Right.
He's the inspiration for Zodak from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Remember
Oh,
Zodak?
interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Metron is like, hey, there's some weird shit going on. I need to send. He's talking to Flash, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. He's like, something weird is going on. I'm going to send you somewhere. And all of a sudden, these three characters are just like transported through time and space. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay.
So this issue is about Green Lantern realizing that he and a few other members of the JLA have been transported to another planet where all of these like gigantic gods live, and they're trying to find their way back to Earth to stop the Justice League that has been left behind from stopping Lex Luthor, because those events caused Darkseid to come and destroy the universe, essentially. So it's
we're
like this
looking at a
weird
Marty
time
McFly sort of
travel.
situation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting because a few of the Justice League members have to go back in time to stop the Justice League members from saving the day. So that way a worse fate doesn't fall on the world. So this one I'm gonna very quickly skim through it because it's so confusing and weird. But essentially we start off with Flash and Aquaman talking to each other, and they're kind of like getting caught up as to what's going on and where they are. And at the same time, the Green Lantern is waking up, and we're seeing that for what he thought was months, he was in this like weird slumber, and his ring put him in this state to kind of save his mind after being transported through time and space. And while in this weird space, he's like going through these different dimensions. There's one where he's just like relaxing, and then when he kind of realizes what's going on, he starts like jumping through them. So he ends up in this field, and then he ends up on this planet where all of these dead heroes are in these stones, and he's getting these prophecies. And then he finally gets awoken by this like Sentry Guard type character that is part of this world, and he wakes him up and says, listen, this is where you are. You are on, I can't remember where this place is, but it's like an actual like new world where all of these like gigantic gods live.
Wonder World.
We cut back to present day, and we see the Joker talking to Lex. They're kind of going through their evil plan. They have this alien like captured. Blooper Man and Martian Manhunter are stopping floods from happening, I believe.
Wait, Blooper Man. I missed. Where are we?
Blue Superman and Martian Manhunter are like
gotcha.
stopping Lex from doing something at this point. And then we also see Green Arrow. Sorry, I keep getting kicked out of the site here. Green Arrow shows up to the bad guys squad, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna join you because I want to prove my dad wrong. We see Aztec, who is a new member of the JLA, and he's talking to Metron, right? Metron? What's his name?
Metron, yeah.
What is going on even at this point? It's so confusing and convoluted. We cut back to Wonder World, and this being is still kind of showing Kyle around, and he meets up with Aquaman and Flash again, and they go and they talk to this like council of these godlike superheroes, and essentially they're like, yeah, we know Darkseid is going to be fucking shit up for you guys, but unfortunately we're actually supposed to be sticking around here because a bigger threat is coming, and we've got to just kind of wait around for that, so we can't help you, sorry. You're kind of just trapped here. So then they come up with the idea to just send them back in time themselves rather than being brought over there, and they'll try and jump out of this like
Aquaman has the idea, right? Yeah.
This time stream at the right moment. And Green Lantern says, yes, I think I might have the ability to do that, because when I was in my weird dream sequence, I actually ran into this strange being who introduced himself. He's this gold figure that's cloaked in red, and he introduces himself as Hourman. And in this version, Hourman is not some guy that takes a pill, which is pretty cool. He is like a godlike being that can control time and space. And he does this like really great Doctor Who like introduction, and he's like, hey, what's going on, Kyle? This isn't the first time I'm meeting you, but this is the first time you're meeting me. And the first time I meet you will actually be the next time you meet me. It's really cool. I love that. So he's pretty much like, I think he gives him a way to track down where he came from. So that way, when they're going through this weird time stream, they know when to jump out and go back to Earth. So yeah, they put them on this pedestal thing, they blast them off, and Green Lantern, I think, has got like some like chairs set up for them, and Flash is like spinning this wheel to go back in time. It's this whole thing. We cut over to Batman. He's actually talking to Mirror Master, and he is like double crossing the Injustice Society, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we cut back to the heroes as they're jumping back in time, and they get the signal to jump, but unfortunately they jump too late, and we're left with this final panel where we're actually brought to Earth in the future, when Darkseid actually takes over the Earth, and they've got to figure out a way now to go back in time to stop the JLA from stopping Lex. So
before you say anything, Adam, I'm going to give a quick preamble to this series, okay?
Please do.
So I had stopped reading superheroes from Marvel and DC around, say, 93. And I always said the only way I'm going to get back into it is if some really good writers are hired to write these characters. And I remember I was working downtown, I think Subway, around 97, and I went to a corner store and I saw JLA #4 by Grant Morrison, and I was already a fan of Grant Morrison from Animal Man and Doom Patrol, and I'm like, I have to buy this. That's it. I don't read superheroes anymore. I'm too old for them, but I have to buy this. And I bought it, and I'm like, this is so good. And I started reading JLA, and this brought me back into superheroes. And I'm not kidding, that new love for superheroes lasted, we'll say, 20 years. Like, I'm still in it, but not as much. But this was a conscious effort by Grant Morrison as a reaction to the comics I was actually talking about earlier, where the Frank Millers, even, basically the mid-90s stuff, where it got too realistic, too violent, and just and Grant Morrison felt like it doesn't matter who pumps the air into the Batmobile's tires. That's one of his examples. It doesn't matter if Batman has a run in his tights. Why try to explain how a brain can exist in a jar or a monkey can talk? It doesn't matter, just tell the story. And so this to me is actually an example of, even though I don't think the art matches the writing nearly as much as I'd like it to, as much as, say, Frank Quitely would, I do feel like this is the type of superheroes I wish more modern writers were telling. That being said, it sounds like you think this is too realistic, too modern, or what do you think?
Well, I'm kind of on the fence about this.
Okay.
In the sense where I'm a huge Morrison fan.
Okay.
I love their writing. I love their work. This is my first time reading anything of theirs for a mainstream superhero, like top tier stuff. Like I'm also accustomed to like Animal Man.
Okay.
Like, but when it comes to this, the problem I have isn't so much with the prose. The issue is with the actual depiction of the characters, and the art's one thing we can get into later, but it's this barrage of our heroes were boring. We need to like make them new, like the new, the new Coke thing that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's freshen them up. Like I hate this iteration of Superman.
Yep.
They completely squashed anything that made him distinctive or iconic.
Yep.
I actually really detest this version of Aquaman as well. The idea of having to make Aquaman gritty is something that I have umbrage with. Granted, I know how this one influenced the Aquaman movie series with Jason Momoa, but realistically, his character is more influenced by, I think, that 2000s run on Aquaman, where it was more an adventure serial, which is what I thought Aquaman needs to be. And I just think,
magic.
Yeah, exactly, magic, adventure. I just feel like I have nothing against Morrison's writing. I think he's doing the best he can with characters that were unfortunately blemished by the need of the mid-90s and late 90s publishers to make things gritty and darker and new for the youths.
Yep. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. Now, I wanted to point out that Grant Morrison has said that that they wish that Wally West stayed as the Flash. I can understand. I can forgive.
I actually don't mind.
Yeah,
Wally
I don't
West
mind
as the
that.
Flash, yeah.
But Kyle Rayner, no way is Green Lantern. I'm sorry. Connor Hawke is Green Arrow. No way. I personally think that all the originals are always the best. The only exception I'll make is Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, Ray Palmer, and Qatar Hall. Those are the only exceptions. Okay.
I can even forgive Green Arrow because it's like his son, and there's like the relation there. So like. He's still part of the story. But that's fair. Yeah, I understand though.
Yeah. But I'll tell you why I can't. Because superheroes shouldn't age. So how can a 25-year-old have a 25-year-old son? That's why I can't forgive it. But that's just me though. But the Superman is the worst. The Electric Blue Superman. Yes. Again, Electric Blue Superman would have been cool for like 3 or 4 issues, a little
like an arc, or
a little arc. But I don't know how long it went on, a year or two. But it just, and the thing is, Grant Morrison's run is ruined by the fact that all these characters were completely altered into these forms. So in a way, I feel like this run brought DC out of the 90s into more of like, and he calls it a Silver Age revival, which I am all for. But I liked the era that this kind of brought back of like the Silver Age revival, and as we would see in the next few years, all these characters would kind of revert back to their original forms anyway.
I genuinely think that if Superman was in his red and blues, if this was Barry Allen or a different Green Arrow, I think that this would have been one of the all-time Justice League story arcs. It's so good, it's so fun. I think it has that same charm that we were talking about from before in the last comic, but updated.
Sure.
Like it's and the story, while goofy, it's actually kind of an interesting, fun idea for a story. The art is pretty fun, especially for the 90s. Around this time, I think that a lot of the 90s art is kind of ugly. To be ugly and edgy, and at least this has like some character to it.
There's not a lot of pouches on it.
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, everybody has the proper amount of pockets.
Not too many bandoliers. It's always good.
I think it's just the right level of goofiness for a comic book. There's still some stakes. Bad things are going to happen, but they're going on this crazy time travel road trip to save the day, and they've got to go back in time to stop themselves from saving the day to save the day. It's so interesting. It has some of the best Superman and Lex Luthor scenes. I remember so clearly at the end they convinced Lex to save the day or whatever, and there's this great exchange with Superman and Lex where he's kind of Superman's kind of I know that there's still some good in you. I know that there's still you're not all awful. I know that there's still some saving you. And if he was in his red and blue costume, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Not that the blues change who he is, but I don't know. It just kind of like
it makes him less human, and I think that's the thing that takes away from it.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of interactions, I loved, even though it's only for one page, the quibble between the Joker and Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
Where he goes, "I think I killed Superman."
Yeah.
What do you mean? We were supposed to kill him and Batman together.
It's
Like,
so
I love
great.
that.
There's so many like weird moments in this.
Yeah.
Like at one point, Martian Manhunter and a couple of the other Justice League members in like another issue of this arc, they get trapped in one of the Joker's weird like mind palaces with the Rock.
Yes.
And to escape, Martian Manhunter rewires his own brain to be insane like the Joker, so he could figure out how to escape. It's just like there's so many like weird
Can
like
I just say,
little.
I freaking love that.
That's
great.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Now, when you say you this arc, do you mean Rock of Ages or do you mean
Rock of Ages.
Have you read
I
Grant
don't think
Morrison's?
no, I haven't read the whole run or anything. I just remember this story in particular
because it's all good,
Yeah.
and I've read it all twice all the way through.
Yeah.
And we have a friend Al Piper who a few years ago was like, "Oh, I reread the Justice League JLA. It's not that good." I knew he was wrong, but I proved him wrong today when I read this. I'm like, no, it's just as good as I remember. It's like, and you know, Grant Morrison's recent writing is not quite as good as his stuff from here, but like you're going through these pages and I feel like I think Mark Waid said Grant Morrison is like the Jack Kirby of writers. Every page, every panel has so many little ideas thrown in that it's like, you know, as a kid especially, no, as an adult, you're just like, oh, another one. Like Metron kind of showing how they're going to go into this other dimension, and it basically looks like a bunch of comic book pages, like two-dimensional comic book pages.
It almost looks like illustrated too.
Right. Exactly. That looks like an old '60s comic almost.
And that actually evokes to me like what Morrison did with Animal Man.
Yep.
With the reality splitting segments, and also I love that evocation of Animal Man by having Mirror Master in there as well. Like these slight nods to Morrison's own past. I'm sorry to.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then also we have essentially looks like a two-dimensional character right here, right? Like, and it's
like
also
a beam made of pure light almost. So there's like no dimension to it. Yeah, it's
I
great.
also love the fact of this storytelling device of having the story being told by Green Lantern to someone else, and we don't know who it is for the first few pages. And again, we're only on page, what is this, 3 or 4? And Green Lantern is like, Green Lantern's talking about how he was tricked by Metron to find this Philosopher's Stone, and he makes his way into this dimension, and he's like, I spent months. It felt like months, even though I didn't have to recharge my ring. Again, dream logic, right? In this place where I thought I'd found the Philosopher's Stone and the whole world was perfect. Like I say, it was months before I noticed everything was green. And you're like, oh, this is such a cool idea. And you're sitting here, and that's one panel, okay? And people talk about other writers, how, I don't want to mention them by name, but this is so much better than almost every other superhero writer, in my opinion. And again, that's one panel I just mentioned. That panel is a series. Like just that idea. And then now look, he's in another dimension. And then he's like, now this is the same one. The whole place was an illusion captured by my mind through the power ring. And I woke up in a field of hypnotic flowers, no closer to the stone. Like, this is like a fairy tale. Now this I want to talk about. We talked about being ashamed of like the genre and like versus being comfortable with the genre. I love this part where he's like, until I ended up on a graveyard planet orbiting a black sun, and I found, I don't know, superheroes from other times and planets, I guess. And we see this character who's been frozen into a statue. He has a big lightning bolt on his chest and like a belt, and you're just thinking, yeah, he's a superhero. They're not ashamed of what they are. They know exactly. Only superheroes can face this threat. Like, it's just, I love it. And the whole issue's like that.
I also love just like how much thought went into it. Like, he ends up in this world where these superheroes have been lost to time through this weird dimension, and he's like, who's gonna be the person in charge of this weird dimension? Hourman, of course. Right. It's like, let's take this like old character that nobody knows or is even thinking about, and let's just change them and make them like fit into the story. And I think doing it in a really interesting, fun way.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, this brings up just two grievances I want to make with this particular issue. One is actually, I think, a counterpoint to what Mike said. I do agree. I think that whole sequence could be a series of itself, with Green Lantern being within this big world. So why not make it a series itself? One issue I had overall with this issue, it felt very compressed.
Okay.
And I think that's something that, as much as I love Morrison's writing, especially with the later era stuff, it's a criticism I have. There's so much thrown at the audience. I feel it doesn't have enough breathing room. And this is a very text-heavy comic. I feel it's very compressed. That's a minor quibble. Getting to why we're talking about this comic today, I don't know if I'm in the minority. I hate this version of Hourman.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, Hourman's only one page.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's that much to hate, but what is it you hate about this Hourman?
Very generic. They just happen to be a generic color swap for, Spectre, maybe?
Well,
because all they do is they have this incredible godlike power when there's already so many entities within the DC universe who does this. And I love when Morrison evokes kind of forgotten golden era characters, but I love when they do that and then they make it seem authentic, or they kind of deconstruct that character in a way that brings out an interesting facet of them.
Okay.
I didn't get that with this. There was just a name drop of Hourman, that it's consciousness from this Miraclo, like, DNA biologic thing, which is fine, but what else is there to this character? They're just kind of thrown in there as a name check. And I just feel that it's kind of cheap. I feel that's a wink and a nod for fans, which, again, I think we can all kind of agree Morrison is very guilty of, that they'll throw out these allusions to, like, the hardcore fans who know the history, but does not have an impact on the story.
Well, but here's the thing. If I can contrast that with the way Easter eggs are dropped in, say, a Star Wars film, or I just want to say the way that Easter eggs are dropped in Star Wars films or Batman films or Superman films is embarrassing to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's embarrassing. The way Grant Morrison does it is more like, I can't explain it. It's done in a way like when Grant Morrison brought back the Batman of Zen and R, or whatever it was, the purple and yellow Batman, or even like Hourman, it's done in a way that if you don't know who Hourman is, you just
doesn't matter.
Who is this? And then you go, what, the Hourman? He's been gone for 20 years. So that's why I feel like it's not pandering, right?
That's how I feel about it too. Is I think that an outside reader wouldn't be confused because he's been pushed through this other dimension where it's already established, like, there's a bunch of heroes from all these other dimensions, and then there's this time god there that says you need to go do something. And I feel like it doesn't take away not knowing the backstory, but adds for the people that do know Hourman, right? They're not like stopping you to be like, what do you think? Like, nudging you, like, remember this from...
Yes.
Do you remember Ponda Baba? Remember the guy that said that he doesn't like you and I don't like you either?
God, that was...
What if we throw them in there and
they say
the exact same thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's get out of here. We got to go to a cantina over on Moss Isley, huh?
Yeah.
It's like, what is this?
Right.
Like, this, I don't know. I felt like if you get it, you get it. If you don't, it's not a consequence.
You know what? I will concede that maybe it's not as painful as Easter egg,
right?
But I still feel that maybe it's just the missed opportunity. And I know you can't really criticize what an artist didn't do rather than what they did do,
right?
But to me, I just think Morrison is such a good writer of human emotion and complex relationships.
Sure.
They're known for these epic scale stories that they write, but Morrison's also known for great character work. I always go back to Animal Man being one of those comics that just made me... You talked about what got you back into comics. Animal Man got me back into comics after years of abstaining from reading anything.
I should point out superheroes. I was still reading comics. I just wasn't reading superheroes.
You see, I was abstaining altogether. Even indies were just something where there was a lot of issues I was having in general. But being able to explore more into that and then see, this bleeds over to mainstream DC and Marvel superhero comics as well. Well, DC, because Morrison didn't do too much with Marvel. Endpoint I'm trying to desperately make and failing at. I just feel it would have been so great to see what Morrison could have done with Rex Tyler.
Yeah,
And,
Sure.
And I
I
know
agree with you.
Tyler's character, there were some like quote unquote gritty depictions where he was depicted as being reliant upon Mariclo as a drug, and there was this whole analogy for drug addiction that was going on. Well, it wasn't even an analogy, it was outright a drug addiction
Right.
in those comics.
Right.
But, you know, not done with the type of maturity or interesting prose that you would see from Morrison. So yeah, I guess it's just... Is it bitter grapes? I guess it's bitter grapes for me.
Sour grapes.
Well, these are bitter.
Bitter grapes?
I do get what you're saying, because even after you had mentioned that you wish that you could have spent more time in that Green Lantern zone, I think that they could have had Green Lantern unconscious the whole issue, and Aquaman and the Flash are just dragging him along, and as they're kind of like figuring out the story of how to go back, he is like jumping through the different like lantern-esque dimensions, getting to that point, and kind of maybe even going on that like mini adventure with Hourman or something. They definitely could have expanded on that, and it would have been a great addition, I think.
Yeah, as a rule, I kind of hate one-offs in addition to an overall story arc, but it would have been nice just to have a standalone issue showing Green Lantern in that zone, or just seeing, going through Wonder World itself, and not cutting back and forth so much with all these vignettes with so many characters. With that said, I'm going to admit, I read the single issue of this arc.
Sure.
Right.
I have not read all, was it 12 issues of Rock of Ages?
6.
5 or 6.
6.
Oh, it was only 6. So I might change my mind going back to read the whole thing because it could be more cohesive for me. I guess I'm just on the fence. As I said, it's not my favorite of all 3 issues we've read, and definitely not my favorite iteration of Hourman, because I'd rather take the cheesy 70s, or sorry, Silver Age 50s rendition, because there's more character to it. But you know what? For what it is, it's Morrison. I'm not gonna put my nose up at it. Yeah,
I think too, as a single issue, it's not great, because it like you were saying too, it's so fast paced.
Yeah,
things are just happening, and if you don't have the context, it's definitely hard to jump in with this. Where with the last issue, you don't need the full backstory of the Green Lantern Solomon Grundy fight to understand what's happening. They kind of just are like, yeah, he was stuck in a Green Lantern bubble for a while and he crashed on Earth, and you get it. Where this one, it's like, it's kind of awful reading it in the middle of the story. You almost need to go from issue 1 to enjoy anything that's happening, because it's like,
this is the midpoint of
yeah.
So a quick question for both of you then. Okay, so I've given my point of view, which one I prefer. What is your favorite Hourman? What's your preferred Hourman?
Well, I think the original Rex Tick-Tock Tyler is one of the worst Golden Age characters, so I definitely prefer the android.
But he invented TikTok.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a fun origin.
But it's funny because when you Google TikTok, the app, it shows up 20 entries before you get to the old just TikTok, right? But yeah, I prefer the Android one, definitely. What about you?
I feel like they're kind of equal. I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't enjoy the Android one if I didn't have the context of the other one, but I feel like the original is kind of lacking something as well. Like, he almost needs another reboot. Like, give him something else.
I just want to bring up one thing we did not touch on so far in this podcast. There was another Hourman, which was Rick Tyler, Rex's son, who had probably my first exposure to the character, not this particular version, but of an Hourman in Infinite Crisis.
Interesting.
So I was going to include that Hourman. However, just as with this issue, it's also the first Silver Age appearance of Dr. Fate. The issue where Hourman 2 is introduced is also the first appearance of Dr. Midnight 2. So we will be reviewing that issue in the Dr. Midnight episode.
Interesting.
So yeah, it all ties in, right? But yeah, and his costume is purple and red, I think.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And you know, I want to say of all the editions of it, it's probably the most interesting because he's a legacy character. It's kind of like Starman, right, where he's trying to live up to the legacy of his father while also acknowledging his own personal demons and the demons his dad was facing as being addicted to Mariclo, while also being part of the epic story that was Infinite Crisis and all the great minutiae that came from that. Like, even though he wasn't really touched upon, and I don't know how much of a full Hourman figure he was because he didn't last long, probably that is my favorite iteration of the character.
Okay,
That's
interesting.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, but
and maybe we'll include you on the Dr. Midnight episode too. But anyway, I just
phone in, man.
Yeah, I just want to point out, going back to the whole thing about Green Lantern referencing spending months on this world. Now, obviously, it would be at some point you'd run out of ideas, right? And the point of this reference is not what he did there, it's how long he was there and the fact that it was green and the fact that he didn't realize. But I also want to say that one of the things about Grant Morrison, they said once, is that, and this is incredible advice he gave to some young writers, he said, if you ever feel like you have a bunch of really good ideas, don't feel like you have to save them. Use them all up, and then it'll force you to come up with more ideas. So I feel like Grant Morrison is always dumping as much as he can. That's why in one panel you have like a world, and the next panel you have all these ideas. You're like, oh my, this could be a series, this could be a series. I think that's why. Now, the other thing I want to point out, one of my favorite panels, this reminds me of All-Star Superman when Superman is explaining the new or updated Fortress of Solitude to Lois, and Superman's going through like, oh, I've got every species in the entire universe, a sample shrunken down into this drawer here, there, and like, oh, I've got this alien that eats baby suns, and I'm gonna feed him. Oh, what are you feeding him? Baby suns, of course, or baby universes or something. Right. But in this scene here, they're walking through Wonderworld, and the characters explain to Green Lantern, the city of Omnitropolis covers the entire surface area of Wonderworld. Currently, we're in the museum district. See there? The brain of A-Mind, all that remains of that immortal cyborg tyrant. And there, an evil imp from the 5th dimension, trapped in a bottle with 6 dimensions. Great. And then, there in that petri dish is the infant universe of Quick. And it's QWEWQ, which is there's a certain name.
Palindrome?
Yeah, when words are spelled the same both ways.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's one panel, and you get more imagination in that one panel than you would in most full comics nowadays. I just love this stuff. And even though this is now, what is this, 25 years ago? 1997.
Yeah.
Who can do math? I can.
25.
This is like, it feels to me like it's modern. And the art, I want to say briefly, some panels are great, but it's almost like McFarlane.
Yeah.
The poses are great. The superheroes, like the close-up is great, right? That's great. But then once you get to a faraway shot of a guy standing there, it falls apart. That's what I feel like.
I agree.
Like shots like that. But that's great. And you know, like close-ups of faces are great, and action poses are great. But it's almost like, what's the artist's name again? Where is the artist? Howard Porter. Yeah, just like McFarlane, he's good at superhero action and like crazy poses, but he can't just do a guy standing there. Like, that's great. Like this back shot of Green Lantern on page 3, that's amazing. It's all, you know, the leg is, it's almost like he can draw action perfectly, but once he tries to draw someone just standing at an eye level angle, it falls apart. But anyway, I think that's all we have to say about Hourman. It's already been over an hour. I honestly didn't think.
Oh my god, our powers are weak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, time for more drugs. Okay, so we want to thank Adam Peltry for joining us on our big Hourman discussion. Thank you for appreciating the Golden Age superheroes, Adam.
As always, yeah.
And yeah, I think we're gonna have to have you back on our Dr. Midnight episode, so I'll be sure to slot you in for that.
Perfect.
Awesome. And yeah, I guess that's it. I want to thank Josh for, as always, for joining me. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys also for listening to the podcast. You can find all of our stuff on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find our stuff wherever you can find podcasts. So it's Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, all that good stuff. Please leave us a comment. Leave us a review. Let us know what you guys think about the comics and things we're talking about. We want to keep that comics conversation going, so keep in touch.
That's right. So until the next time, see you later.